I'm going to say something that might put some of you in your feelings, but Waves Audio still has the best free plugin available right now. There aren't any ifs, ands, or buts about it. In terms of usefulness, there are no other plugins that compare to Waves StudioRack. Let me show you how it works. Okay, so what StudioRack allows you to do is create custom plugin chains all within one plugin. Right here in the middle of the plugin is the plugin rack, and this is where you can click and load any plugin that you'd like. And what's really cool about this is that it isn't just for Waves plugins. So you can see right here that I can choose and access all of my Waves plugins up here. But then if I wanted to select a plugin that isn't a Waves plugin, you can just select VST number 3. And then you see right here, all of my third-party plugins are organized by the company in which I bought them from. Now, if you want to access all of your other plugins from these other companies that are on your computer, just come up here to the top of the StudioRack plugin and select this icon right here with the 3 little lines. And under the VST number 3 tab, you can just select Scan Plugins, and it's going to search for all of your plugins on your computer. And then you can also select how the plugins are organized right here. You can see that I just have it set by the vendor name. So back to the plugin rack, you have 8 available slots to build your custom plugin chain. And remember, this is all taking place within one plugin. If you look at the plugin rack over here in FL Studio's Mixer, you see that I'm only taking up one slot with the StudioRack plugin. So let's go ahead and build a little vocal chain inside StudioRack. So first we have our EQ plugin right here. Then we're going to go ahead and add a compressor. Next, let's go ahead and add an analog style EQ to boost the brightness of the top end. So I'm going to go ahead and select the Mani EQ. And then the last thing we're going to add is a de-esser to take care of some of the S's in our vocal. Now, a really cool feature in StudioRack that I want to show you is this parallel split function right here. When you select parallel split, it's going to give you 2 separate parallel channels to work with, but you can add up to a total of 8 parallel tracks by selecting this plus icon right here, and you can select the minus icon to take away a parallel track. So this is actually very useful for setting up things like your reverb, your delays, and even parallel compression. I think the most confusing thing for a lot of people with parallel compression or using reverb sends is setting up the routing. And this plugin basically simplifies it all with the parallel split function. So your vocal signal or whatever track you have running through StudioRack would go through the plugin chain right here and then leave the plugin rack and be sent over here to the master fader, where it then leaves the StudioRack plugin. And then wherever you have this parallel split taking place in your plugin chain, a copy of the signal at that point in the chain is sent over here to the parallel tracks. And that copy of the signal is sent out and will run through whatever plugins you have loaded on the parallel track. And then it will also be sent over here as a separate signal to the master fader, where it will also leave the StudioRack plugin. And if you wanted, you could activate this second parallel track right here by selecting number 2, making sure that it lights up. And then it too would send out a copy of the signal through whatever plugins are loaded on the second parallel track. It'll leave this track and be sent over here to the master fader, where it joins the other tracks in leaving the StudioRack plugin. So the master fader controls the volume output of all 3 of these signals joining together at the master fader. And then to control the volume of each track individually, you have these volume faders right here at the bottom of the parallel tracks. And then you also have the volume knob right here for the original copy of your signal going through the plugin rack. Up here at the top left of the plugin, you have an input control knob, and then the parallel tracks also have their own input control knob. So you have all of your input and output controls to gain stage as you please. So just to do an example, we could load our reverb plugin for our vocal right here on the first parallel track. So I'm going to go ahead and select reverb, and you want to make sure that the wet dry knob is set to 100%, so that way the parallel track is only going to be the reverb of the vocal. And then you would control the volume of the reverb with this volume fader right here. Something else to point out with the parallel split function is that you can load a completely set of different parallel tracks at any point in your plugin chain. So say we wanted to do some parallel compression earlier in the chain, not saying that this is the correct order to do this in, But let's just say that we wanted to load a parallel compressor right here after the Manny EQ. All we'd have to do is click and drag these plugins down to free up a plugin spot right here. Then all we'd have to do is select parallel split, and it's gonna open up a brand new set of parallel tracks. Next, we could load a parallel compressor. So let's go ahead and load the CLA 76 plugin. This is a good one to use for heavy compression. So at this point, I think you get the picture with how the parallel split function works. Another cool feature is the multi-band split function. So again, just like the parallel split, at any point in our chain, we can select multi-band split. And when you select multi-band split, it's going to open up this option that allows you to do multi-band processing within StudioRack. You see here between each track, it gives you a frequency crossover point, kind of resembling what a multi-band compressor allows you to do. And you can have up to 5 frequency bands. So how is this going to be useful? Well, let's just say for the sake of this example that you had an 808 running through StudioRack and you wanted to apply distortion to everything under 200 Hertz. All you'd have to do is set the frequency to 200 Hertz right here, and then you would just load a distortion plugin on the lower band. Now everything that's under 200 Hertz is going to get distortion added to it, while everything that's above 200 Hertz is going to be left untouched. So that's just one simple example of the multi-band split function, but you could really use this for anything: compression, stereo imaging, anytime you want to process the individual frequency bands separately. Now, another cool feature of the StudioRack plugin is the macro control. Here in the macro section, you can select any parameter on any plugin that's loaded inside your plugin rack. So let's go ahead for this example, come here to the Manny EQ, and we're gonna set this macro to the band 4 gain. And you see here that it creates a little knob that we can use to quickly adjust that setting that we assign this macro to. So if we open up the Manny EQ, we can see right here that the band 4 gain is going to control the top end frequencies. And you'll know that you have a macro assigned to this control of this plugin because this control is highlighted in red. And since this knob right here is going to control the amount of top end that we're boosting or cutting by, we're basically controlling the brightness of our vocal with this knob. So we can come back over here to our macro control number 1, and we can rename this brightness. And you can see right here on the plugin that as I increase the macro knob, it's also increasing the gain knob on the plugin. And you have 8 macro knobs to work with. So if you have certain settings in your chain that you find yourself adjusting the most, the macros feature will speed up that process. And just a quick note, any parameter inside StudioRack can also be set to a macro knob. So it doesn't have to be specifically from a plugin that's loaded in your plugin rack. So for instance, the volume level of the reverb right here, we could just right click this fader and set it to macro number 2. Now when I adjust macro number 2, you see that the reverb level is correlated with it. Now, when you get to the point where you want to save your plugin chain, just come up here to this drop down right here and select Save As. You have 2 separate places where you can save this plugin chain to. You have the local file where it's just going to be saved to your computer. And then you also have the Studioverse, which is a new feature of this plugin, and it's basically a place where anybody in the world can upload and share their plugin chains. You can create a name for your plugin chain, so let's go ahead and title this Vocal Chain. You can add different tags that you can attach to your chain so people can easily find it by category. So let's go ahead and type in vocal. And the audio scan feature down here allows you to play a portion of your audio through the Studioverse so that way it can see what your chain is going to sound like. You can select an image as the cover art for your plugin chain. So I'm going to go ahead and select vocal. Or if you want to, you can select your own custom image by uploading it right here. Then you can describe your plugin chain right here in this box. And then lastly, you can select whether you want to make this public or keep it private. And you can access all of these available plugin chains by coming back over here to the Studioverse search bar at the top of the StudioRack plugin. Let's go ahead and search Mix with Jerry. and you'll see some of my chains that I've uploaded right here. It's a really cool feature that allows you to connect with the audio community, share ideas, and just kind of speed up your workflow, so make sure you check that out. Click the Studio Verse tab right here next to the search bar. This is where you can set up your profile and do some more advanced searches for plugin chains. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.